Good morning.
Good morning. Happy Tuesday. And can we just restate what this thing is about, this Tuesday talk?
We do it every week.
I know. But there might be someone who's new and it's like, oh, they're going to teach us something today.
We are going to teach
We
them
are
something.
going to teach them something. But it's not a half hour of us teaching you guys. We're trying to keep these like 15 minutes. And you can ask then a question about what we're teaching or any question. This was just an excuse for us to get together and you guys to go, hey, I've got a question and I haven't seen Todd and Stacy because we're not in person. And really, we even started this before we were in person. It's just an easy way for you guys to say, hey, I've got a question.
Exactly.
There they are.
Whether it's in your transaction or something that you have coming up down the pipe, or something that you already closed. Yeah, instead of picking up the phone and calling us on the hotline or sending us an email, you actually get us live.
Yeah. So feel free to ask a question after our little chit chat here. So,
yeah, exactly. All right. So today we are going to talk about appraisals and what happens when an appraisal valuation comes in under the contract sales price. Not anything that's happening on a regular basis, but we're seeing more and more of them. So we're starting to see a lot of those questions coming in. What are options? How do we keep this transaction together? Is it smart to, if I'm on the buyer side, to challenge the appraisal? What do I do if I'm on the seller side? So we'll talk about all the options, paint the picture on how you can proceed.
Yeah, actually, I had 2 questions last week.
Oh.
So Mark Baker and Michael Carter both asked.
Okay.
And you guys don't call me directly that often. And so I got 2. I'm sure the sport line got several.
I know Paul has gotten a couple. I've gotten a couple. So yeah, we're starting to see them. And again, it's generally just because we're in such a hot market. So values are going up faster than what the previous month, 6 months comparables support. So
great.
So
first thing.
What's
the easiest solution if it comes in low?
So easiest solution, well, there's 5 solutions. But the easiest one is, well, what's your easiest?
I was going to say the seller comes down in price.
What's the
that's
easiest?
The easiest meaning,
but
not the least resistance.
Yeah,
but
I wasn't sure if that's what you meant.
So it depends on what side you're on. I'm just saying the easiest way to come together is the seller just says, oh, that's fine.
I'll reduce the price down to the market value that the appraiser came up with. So let's just do a scenario. Let's say you're representing the buyer. You guys structured an offer. Your buyer structured an offer at 5.25. The appraisal came in at 5.20. So you're $5,000 off. So you can approach that seller and say, hey, we're objecting to the appraisal by filling out the appraisal objection form, sending over the copy of the appraisal or a letter from the lender stating it came in low, either or, and you send that over, and then you ask, if you're representing the buyer, hey, Mr. Seller, would you be willing to come down that $5,000 to match the appraised value? There you go. Option number 1.
Option number 1.
And I'd say about 75% of the time, this is how it gets resolved.
And a lot of times because maybe they even offered above asking, so the seller is already like excited that they sold for more than what they were expecting.
Yeah, and most of the time up front that may have been a slightly ambitious price, but we're going to try. Yeah.
So but nobody has to do anything. The deal could just be dead. If the seller says no and the buyer doesn't want to do anything, then the deal is just dead and people move on about their lives.
Yeah, so that's going to be option number 5, and I'll go through that one. So option number 1. So option number 1, seller reduces the purchase price. Amend, extend, easy does it.
Okay.
Option number 2, you split the difference. So the seller comes down, let's say half, $2,500, and the buyer comes up $2,500. Hey, we were willing to offer this amount on the property, and if the seller isn't willing to absorb that whole thing, let's meet in the middle. So as you guys know, the buyer's lender will only loan up to the amount of the appraised value. So when we say that the buyer has to come up, they can't get their loan for more than the appraised value. So what that actually means is they're coming to closing with extra cash out of pocket. So that is an extra $2,500 that they bring above their closing costs and above their down payment. So you got to make sure that your buyer has deep enough pockets to even be able to do that.
And always consult your lender.
Yes.
Because that extra $2,500, if this person was tight with their down payment, especially an FHA, or even a 10% conventional loan, if they were tight and they needed extra funds just to stay in the bank because the lender wants to know that they have cushion, liquid assets to keep making their payments, they might dip into their reserves just in their own cash that the lender says, no, I'm not comfortable with that. So always consult the lender anytime you guys are negotiating, coming out of pocket with more money from the buyer, just for a heads up. Am I okay? Am I still good? I don't want to do anything with my loan. But great yes, advice. Negotiate, come together.
Come together. So that, I'd say, option number 2 is probably the second most common option that I see. So 75% of sellers usually say, yeah, sure, I'll reduce sales price. And then the rest of the time, typically that meet in the middle seems to be a really good solution. So option number 3, if the seller digs in their heels, they said, you offered this amount. I think my home is worth this amount. I don't think the appraiser did a very good job, and I'm not coming down on that appraisal or purchase price, excuse me. The buyer can bridge the entire gap. So come up with the extra $5,000. Granted, you check with the lender and it doesn't dip into their cash reserves. But yeah, the buyer can say, great, I opted to write an offer at this purchase price. I stand firm on that, and I'm willing to bridge the difference.
Yeah, and that definitely happens when the seller says, I've got 2 backup offers.
Yeah.
And one of them's cash. They could care less about the appraisal, or maybe they had an appraisal gap in there or something. So this is how the market moves. This is how the market moves up, is that the buyers end up saying, it's worth it to me.
Right.
Regardless of what an appraiser says.
Yeah, I've looked at 25 homes. I've written 10 offers, and this is the house I like. This is the house I want. And it rises above anything else I've seen before. I know it's worth this purchase price, whether you can justify it with comparable sales or not. So that's option number 3. So option number 4, what was my option number 4?
I'm not sure. This was yours.
Did I get those in the right order? Have we gone through 3, or have we already gone for 4? Because I told you the termination one.
Well, the termination would be 5. Yeah, we don't like that one.
Yeah. So let's run through.
No, so I'd say 4 is, let's try and get the appraisal changed.
That's what it was. Challenge.
I knew that.
Adding some humor. So option number 4 is to challenge the appraisal. Now, I've actually seen this done successfully a couple of times this year. Words of caution on challenging an appraisal. It's not easy to do. It's time consuming. And typically appraisers don't like to be challenged.
People don't like to be challenged.
Exactly.
I mean, you're challenging somebody's profession.
Mm-hmm.
So you better have some good ammunition other than just, well, I think he was wrong. That's just, no, you need to find errors that maybe he overlooked or she overlooked. Not that they were a bad appraiser, but maybe they incorrectly had the square footage, or they missed a bedroom,
or
they didn't see a bedroom.
They didn't account for a 3rd car garage. They referenced it as 2, or the acreage of the property. Maybe it was a half an acre lot, and they said it was 0.3. Appraisers are so busy right now, as you guys are, and they have administrative staff that does a lot of the data entry just to get the basic information about the property, the subject property, and some of the comparables into the computer system. So human error, it happens. So make sure that if you're going to challenge an appraisal, you get a copy of that appraisal and you go through every single line, dot those I's, cross those T's, and see if you can find any errors with how they outlined the information about the subject property. And then make sure that they didn't miss a good comparable. I mean, we do recommend that you guys, when you have an appraisal done on your listing, that you pull some comparables that are true comparables, not something that's 1,000 square feet bigger or smaller, or, is in a different neighborhood. But if you have something that you think will really help that appraiser justify the value of the property, we want you to send that over. And if that appraiser didn't utilize that comp, it might be worthwhile finding out why. Why was that comparable left off if you think it was such a good one? Because occasionally comparables get overlooked, and then that does skew the numbers.
Yeah, and that's an important one. It's got to be a good comparable, something that they didn't see.
Yeah.
But looking at the comparables they used and then going, well, that's not a good,
that's not a good
that's
one.
not going to, you're not, that's challenging them. So providing new information,
Yep.
Missed information, that's great. But going in and saying, well, you're wrong.
You did it wrong. Yeah.
That's not going to get
you anywhere.
Yeah.
The other thing that has worked to my advantage is if there's a pending sale in the area that maybe you can tell through the MLS that they received a contract 3 or 4 weeks prior, because it tells you when it was listed and when the contract, when it went pending. If you call that agent and say, hey, when is your property closing? This could be a comparable for my listing that just went under contract. And they say, oh, it just closed yesterday and I haven't entered the sold data. There's oftentimes we've been able to slide in a pending transaction that changed to sold during that appraisal milestone, and gotten that onto the report because maybe that one closed 10 or 15,000 higher than any of the other comparables. So go through the pendings and find out when they're actually closing. And if they're within a day or two of that appraisal, oftentimes you can get the appraiser to add them on. So that one's worked really well.
Perfect. Okay, so
all right,
seller reduces price.
Yep.
Buyer and seller come together on splitting the cost. Yeah, meet in the middle. Buyer just bridges the entire gap. We challenge
the appraisal. Yep.
Properly.
And option number 5.
Deal's dead.
Seller doesn't come down, buyer doesn't come up, buyer terminates.
Take your earnest money, go find another home.
Yep.
Go find another buyer. That is the least desirable thing to happen. And rarely does, because to tell a seller that they're going to go back on the market, they don't want to do that. Yeah. Because they're going to confront an appraisal again. And for them to say, well, I want a cash buyer. I want some Californian coming here with a pocket full of money who's not intelligent to the marketplace and is going to pay above ask. I hear that. Well, no, people coming from other places are intelligent. People with money are intelligent. And they are going to see the market. But you'll hear sellers say, I want somebody who's just going to, look, people are going to make wise decisions with their money. So
exactly. So yeah, option number 5 is terminate if you're the listing agent, put the property back on the market, or call one of the backup offers if you had one in place. If you're representing the buyer, send in that termination, go find another house. And you know, sometimes buyers kind of weigh what their out-of-pocket expenses are for inspection and appraisal, and depending on what that gap is, if it's only $2,000 or $3,000, they say, hey, I already out-of-pocketed, you know, $1,500 on this property. I'm gonna have to do it again on another one. It's gonna be a wash, so I'm gonna stick it out. So
yeah. So I did get a question last week, and it might be like a trick question, because it's just kind of something that's not exactly all the scenarios we said. Let's say the buyer said, I will pay a $10,000 gap between the appraised value and the purchase price. So he's buying it for $550,000. The offer comes in at, or the appraisal comes in at $540,000.
Yep.
I said, I've got 10 grand up front to bridge that gap. There we go. We don't have to negotiate or anything. I got 10 grand. I'm going to do it. Let's say it comes in $15,000 low. And here's the trick question was, this is just a little bit of a different scenario. The buyer said up front, I'll bridge the gap 10 grand. Does that mean that the seller is going to do something different? Did the seller accept anything different because of that gap with that appraisal? And the answer is no.
You got to negotiate through that extra $5,000.
Now we're $5,000 short. We got the 10, we need 5 more. So back to the same solutions. Seller comes down, you guys split the cost. Buyer goes up, challenge the appraisal, or the deal's dead. So that gap didn't make the seller responsible for doing anything. So it was kind of,
that's a great question.
It was like a trick question. It's like when you get your real estate license, your exam, you know, all those little trick questions they do. They just word it a little bit differently. It's the same thing.
But yeah, the seller
like,
is not.
Maybe there's something I wasn't paying attention to. No, you guys were right on track. It's
seller's not bound to make up the difference because you said up front, I'm gonna go this far. Unless you write that into your agreement.
But that could.
I have seen people put in there, a buyer will be willing to bridge the gap up to $10,000, anything beyond that, seller agrees to modify sales price. I have seen that.
If you're representing your seller, make sure you put in a dollar amount.
Yes.
That is risky to just say,
So risky.
I'll come down anything that is not between the gap.
What if it's 25,000?
Yeah. What if the stock market crashed today and a third-party candidate won the election who we don't even know about, and all heck just goes crazy overnight, and the house is worth $80,000 less? And he said that he would come down No. So always put in a stopgap. Yeah, always have a how much. So.
And that goes for anything.
Anything, anytime. Don't just say they'll bridge the gap.
No, how much?
How much? Yeah. So.
Great words of wisdom.
All right.
So those are our 5.
Those are our 5. What to do with a short appraisal or
yes.
a home that comes in under appraised value. So, questions about this, any other topic, anything else? What's going on? What's happening out there?
Yeah.
So let's see. Dominic, some appraisal have moved to drive-by or desktop. Should these be easier to properly challenge? That's a good question.
Yeah, I would say yes, they're a little easier to challenge because that appraiser is relying on you on a drive-by or a desktop to make sure that you've armed them with all the improvements in the property. What an appraiser can't see when they walk into the home is maybe an odor or something like that about the home. So maybe when they're doing a desktop or a drive-by, they didn't notice that there's granite countertops in the kitchen. They thought it looked like Formica, and you forgot to mention that. Or they didn't know it was a brand new roof because they're doing a desktop and they didn't go out there and look at it. So there's certain improvements that can help with the value that appraisers don't always pick up on just through photos. So yeah, those are easier to challenge.
Easier, but probably should have less issues with those ever being undervalued, because the reason that those are being used as a process, a drive-by or desktop, is the lender can see when they plug in the property, this is going to appraise easily.
Yeah.
They actually get triggered. This is simple. I've got a strong buyer, and this is a simple home to evaluate.
And oftentimes those are buyers that are putting a tremendous amount of money down, because what the house has to appraise for, it's not nearly significant to the lender because the loan amount is so much lower.
Right.
So they can look at the neighborhood comps and go, oh, it's going to more than appraise because the buyer's putting 40% down. So yeah, great question.
Yeah. Very timely. Carrie Blum, thanks for speaking about this. Just put an appraisal gap in recent contract.
Yeah,
excellent.
Good job, Carrie.
Katie, what about ordering a second appraisal if buyer's willing to pay for it? Great question.
Mm-hmm.
That could be up to the lender. I haven't seen it for a long time. Most lenders are like, no, this is what my appraisal says. Now, I have seen people leave their lender and go get another lender and start the process over. I haven't seen that occur for a long time, but that is a scenario that can happen. Not an FHA or VA though.
Yeah.
FHA and VA, once an appraisal is done, it gets a little number, and that stands for 6 months.
Yep. Period. So even if you do a second appraisal, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's got a case number.
It's got a case number.
Yeah.
But I have not seen people pull out of a transaction and their lender and go somewhere. I mean, it would have to be such a flagrant appraisal that you feel confident enough to start over, start from scratch. And usually the buyer is like, if it came in low, I feel a little off to pay too much for this property. I mean, how much do I want to fight the appraisal? It's like, I'm now being kind of like, I don't feel too good about this. If it's not being appraised, how much more do I want to pay for this thing? If I can't pay out of my pocket, I don't think I want to go force someone to tell me that's worth more than maybe it really is.
Yeah. So. And of course, in the climate that we're in right now, I mean, buyers are having such a hard time finding houses that, if it's $2,500, $3,000, they're willing to bridge that gap because our prices are appreciating so much that in a matter of months, they've out appreciated that. But in past market conditions, most buyers don't want to pay over appraised value because then they'll be moving into the home and they'll be slightly upside down. And if there is any sort of downturn or stagnation in the market, the home is losing value, yet they paid over market, and it just puts them in a really bad position. Of course, we're not in that climate right now,
Right.
but that's why buyers typically don't want to pay over appraised value.
Does the amount down affect the appraiser's opinion? It should not. I mean, the short answer is it should not affect their opinion. Does it? I mean, these are human beings,
Yeah.
and an appraiser's trying to justify the value for the bank. So that's really what they're
Yeah.
I mean, the bank's taking the risk. When you think about it, the bank's buying the home. You know, they're either buying 80% of it or 90% of it or 97% of it. You know, so it's an appraiser's job to protect the bank and make sure that the bank is making a wise decision in this investment. So if they see that you've got 50% down, would that affect their judgment a little bit? Possibly,
Probably.
but I can't give you a yes or
Yeah.
no on that one.
There's
Yeah,
no yes or no.
yeah. But or the number of offers received.
Yes. So I really love it
I was
when,
saying
the appraisers.
Just had this.
Yeah, I've got a really experienced appraiser on a transaction that I have under contract right now. I'm the listing agent, and he's got 35 years of experience. And the 3 questions he asked me were, did you have multiple offers? If so, how many? Were any of those competing offers at or above the price that the seller accepted? And then how many days did it take to go under contract? I think that's a really savvy appraiser, because what they're looking for is what's the desirability of that property. Because if I can't find the comparable data from 3 months, 4 months, 5 months ago that supports this value, I'm going to show that this is an upward trending marketplace. And I need to know how many people wanted that home and how many showings you had and how quickly you got it under contract to help me justify what that percentage of appreciation is looking like today versus when you went under contract 3 weeks ago. So I think that was really cool.
Yeah, that was all. And were you nervous about that appraisal?
I was nervous about that appraisal. We really pushed the envelope for that neighborhood. It was an over asking price offer. There was no appraisal gap. And I personally could not find any comparable data that supported that purchase price, other than 2 homes that had sold, and we needed 4 for that appraisal. So the appraiser did have to use a couple other comparables that were of lesser value, but show that from the time that those sold versus the time that mine went under contract, the home that I had listed had gone up X amount in value, and that's why we were able to achieve the price that we did. And that had a lot to do with the number of buyers that were interested in the lack of inventory. So
yeah, that's a good appraiser.
He was a great
He's sticking
appraiser.
with market. What's the market doing?
Really good appraiser. Yeah, he was great.
Awesome. Good questions. Good stuff. Okay. We're good. You good, Paul?
Anything else
I'm all good, guys. Yep, we're here if you need us. So I'm all good. You good?
All right.
You good?
We're good.
All right, perfect. Thank you guys so much.
Have a great rest of your week, and enjoy the cooler weather. And October is here in a few days, and have fun watching the debates tonight. It should be entertaining.
All right, guys. If you need us, you know how to get us.
Talk to you guys later.
All right.
See ya.
Bye.
See you later.